Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, October 3rd meeting of the Business and Community Affairs Committee. Today we have two items on our agenda. The first being our monthly report on special events attendance and visitors. And before we get going on the second one, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Olson over there.
Well, thank you. I put the picture of the football stadium, and I found an older picture, so I apologize for the Big 12 logos. Well, one of these days I'll take a picture when I actually go to a game that we can put on there. But the reason we are highlighting this, because we do have some of our game day information we wanted to share with you and remind you, we pretty much have the information that tracks how many people are coming into town. The credit card, hotel information does run a little bit farther behind, so I think that we'll be able to fully catch you up on everything next month. But we wanted to make sure that see that some of these numbers as people visit us on game day. So you see all those bumps right there, pretty consistent all the way across the board. Have an extra about 200,000 people in town on average when we do have game days. Doesn't necessarily mean they're all going to the football game, but they're definitely somewhere in Norman, and be anything from watch parties, people hanging out in local establishments, shopping, or sometimes if you're driving through Norman and you hit that traffic jam. So that might be measuring all that information, but for the most part, those are people that I would assume are hanging around campus. And you can see that pretty solidly stays around that 200,000 mark, every single one. And we can go a little bit deeper into some of the data as people are visiting. So we do have every single game. And like I said, the hotel information along with spending will lag a little bit behind us probably by a month. But this is for the first game of the season, Temple. We had a 6 o'clock kickoff. And if I am remembering correctly, this most of this is kind of the top line would be the whole city of Norman. The blue line, which is just below that, would be the stadium. And of course, it's time graphed all the way across the bottom, so you can see how the extra people, I am assuming some of those people are staying in hotels or houses or VRBOs, so on, with that black line. But that steadily climbs as we get closer and closer to kickoff, and it hangs out pretty, as you imagine, once you get that final shotgun at the end of the game, it starts lowering. So right there, around 150,000 people at kickoff. Same thing when you look at the Houston game, which I think interesting enough, we actually had, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, we had the most out-of-state visitors for the Houston, or is this most people from Texas that came? Tulane. Okay. She told me this morning, so I did not sleep since then, I just forgot. So same thing, about 150,000 marker total in Norman at kickoff, right there around 100,000 people around the stadium. Tulane, this is the one where you see the number clicking a little farther along. If I would have looked at all the slides, I could have told you which one had the most people at. This one was a midday kickoff, so you see that kind of peaking out right there around 4 o'clock. The Tennessee game, which I find interesting enough, we all make the assumptions that it seemed like there was a lot more visitors in town, and I think there was a lot more out-of-town visitors, but you're still kind of peaking out there around the 150,000 mark. There's only so many hotels, so many tickets to the game, so much room to hang out around campus. What we'll see here in the next month is how long these people actually stayed in Norman, how long their hotel stay was, and what approximately our boost in spending was around the city area for the kickoff, and you'll be able to, or for Tennessee SEC games, and you'll be able to tell the difference between some of those as we get farther along. Right here we have it kind of broke down from percentages of where people were coming from for those games. As you can see, pretty much hovering around the 20% area for people from Norman going to the games. The highest mark was Temple, also I hope they're not watching, but probably your lowest quality opponent was Temple, so naturally, probably most of those tickets got handed off and or not sold to other people, and most of your Normanites did go to those games. As you're doing those non-conference games, those early games, you're seeing everything people from Oklahoma hanging in the 80 percentile, and then pretty consistent when you had a team from far out of town coming, hanging around 65%. The Texas numbers are where you have the most of your alumni from OU. So we do have a pretty good number of Texas coming up here for those games. You can see Tulane was the largest number again. We also looked at some of the information. I think Sarah dived way deeper into it, but I would make the assumption there's a lot of Tennessee alumni and coming up from Texas as well. And of course, you see from the opponent's state, you got 11% coming up from Houston. We would assume that a bunch of that was mixed in because we also have a OU alumni coming from Texas in the Houston area. And in the Tennessee, 7.27%, which is a large number when you compare that to everything else. And Tennessee is not a neighboring state, so we know that they traveled a long way and hopefully stayed here for a long time and spent decent money while they were in town. This is kind of going back and telling you for all the way back to 2017, telling you how many people were around campus, in Campus Corner and downtown Norman for those games. Of course, those numbers shoot super high for Campus Corner. There's a lot of events going on. They close down the streets, very pedestrian friendly around Campus Corner. But those numbers also do, depending on your opponent, do kick up pretty good for downtown Norman as well. So you're seeing a lot of people hang around in multiple areas for everything. And once again, as Sarah reminded me this morning and again about 2 seconds ago, Tulane was the highest visitors in Norman. So that's the reason you're seeing that really high number over there.
Parents' weekend.
And it was also parent weekend. She did tell me that this morning too. Any questions? And I think that kind of wraps up all of our OU games as attendance in this, and it might be a combination between me, Trent, and Sarah answering these questions.
I'm sorry to see it.
Could we get the same information for Oklahoma City, Purcell, and Moore to kind of see what their boosts were during our football games, to see kind of what we're losing?
You mean like during the game, the day of the game?
Yeah, just kind of that same percentage. I just want to see what, I imagine that's a siphon when we don't have enough hotels to accommodate that. I would like to see what's spilling over.
I know that we can get with our counterpart over in Oklahoma City and get those numbers to you.
Once again, we make assumptions in because the hotels in Moore are, how many rooms do they have, Trent? You remember? It's only a couple hundred.
Couple hundred, 2 or 3, yeah.
And there's 3,600 in Norman, and then of course Oklahoma City has a crazy amount of hotels. So you would make the assumption that the Oklahoma City is probably hovering there or above what we actually have for overnight guests, is along with that. And more just is overflow. If you can't book a Norman, that's usually where somebody, and it's usually a little bit cheaper if you don't mind driving or getting stuck in traffic for a little bit longer.
We did meet with a Moore hotel operator earlier this week, interested in developing a property here in Norman, and he said, yep, they're the hotelier group in Moore, they see
Spikes.
zero capacity when it's a OU home game weekend, so their numbers would, I think, look very similar to ours, just on a smaller scale. Their prices go up on an OU home game weekend too.
The thing that I fear the most about that is not only you staying in a hotel that's not in Norman, but when you wake up, you go to breakfast, it's not in Norman. You get gas in your car, not in Norman. You do all the things, you come for the game, and then you leave Norman. We don't see any of the benefits, so more hotels. More high.
In those graphs, I noticed there didn't seem to be any reflective change to the University Town Center. Is that,
We did not add that into
It's
these
on the
graphs.
very first one.
it's like a
Okay, there we
yellow,
go.
The
line.
yellow, I mean, it's busy anyway on a typical Saturday is typically the busiest shopping day for a big shopping center like that, so they're busy on a Saturday anyways.
Okay, so it doesn't show the bump because
It's-
they're bandwidth. Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Any more question related to?
If you wouldn't mind going back one slide
Yes.
and then one more. I just think it's interesting to see how much sharper this graph is than the Tennessee one. If you look at the Tennessee graph, go to the next slide, you can see how much shallower the pitch is, meaning they got out into Norman earlier in the day at larger numbers.
Well, the Tulane game was
That would
Parents
reflect
Weekend,
kickoff
true.
times as well.
and so, I mean, every restaurant Friday night, Saturday morning, you should have seen the line out in front of Syrup on Saturday morning. It was- Yeah.
And I think this reflects a lot of business owners' frustrations with 11 o'clock kickoffs constantly in the Big 12. Because the later you have it, of course, the more time people come to town, more time that they have time to go grab a drink or hang out and do some shopping or even tailgate.
Excellent. Are there any other questions on this topic?
Got a few more slides, throw them down real quick, as we do every month to show you kind of where we are on Norman Ford project visits. As you head into August, most of our stuff starts winding down. Westwood Family Aquatic Center. We actually get a few weeks out of school. We start losing lifeguards, so we only open on the weekends. That's the reason you kind of see that steady decline in that green over there. Also, at YFAC, Young Family Athletic Center, we don't host as many tournaments as we get closer to school. Usually that's a dead period in all sports, August, September range, as they're getting adjusted back to school life. We did have a few questions from Councilmember Grant last time about our 21 and up event at Westwood, and we did one a little bit later, and don't make me get off on the dates. It's somewhere in your packets, but we went back and Sarah was kind enough to download all the information that kind of goes along with that, and you can see that I only added the graph from what zip codes they're coming from. So we had about 600 people that came to our last event. It was on July 12th. And we had, as you can see, it's kind of spread out pretty far. We do have small amount of numbers of lifeguards that do live in the Blanchard Noble area. So that might reflect some of what you're seeing in some of these southern zip codes that are popping up, but mostly I think we get pretty good attendance from these bumps. And we also looked at our numbers, and it's about 20% of them are members. So most of these people walking in are paying admission charge just to go out there and hang out. It's nice. I've been to a few of those. It's nice to go and sit in the lazy river when you know you're not going to have a kid or a teenager bump into you, and it's a little bit more relaxing. Adults want to use the recreational opportunities too. Real quick, showing you kind of where we're pacing at the last month at YFAC. Like I said, you kind of see a large drop off of events as you get closer to school starting. We're still impressively, I think it's impressive, there are about 330,000 people that has walked through the doors, and that last 12 months is not a full 12 months because we actually opened our doors in January for events anyways. And a dwelling time, every time I looked at the dwelling time, I was looking at some of the information you know, that's basically how the average time that a person spends in there. It's over 2 hours. It blows my mind. And this is what I thought you were asking about, Mayor. This is just a quick reflection of the past year in our shopping districts, and that top line is UMP. Then you kind of have everything mixed in down there and below. In campus, as you can see, Campus Corner took a big jump right there as football season started.
We gotta close it.
Yeah, I agree.
Was that Noble Parkway on there?
Yes, Ed Noble Parkway is
It's the
Is that Parkway Plaza?
blackish gray. Dark one.
Can't see this one.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's also in your packet. It might be
Yeah.
easier to see in your packet.
And this is where, unless there's any other questions about Norman Ford stuff or kind of attendance and shopping areas, I'll throw it over to Trent for a quick hotel, and this is super small, and he'll hit this up. Hopefully I put it in the right order. I did not put it in the right order. There we go.
I'm Trent Brown, representing Visit Norman. You're stuck with me. I'm sorry, I'm filling in for Dan Shim. Appreciate you guys having me. He just wanted me to cover a couple of things with you. Wanted me to keep it brief because we know that we're trying to be cognizant of the TIF master plan. If you'll notice that on the current demand compared to last year, the current stay value was 224 last year. It's 381 this year, almost doubled. The average daily rate was 129, now it's 173. And the average length of stay has gone up from about a day and a half to now just over 2 days. So that's pretty incredible. If you could bump that over to the next slide. I love seeing this because you see the slow, steady heartbeat of last year, right? And then we hop right into the SEC, right into football. And thank you, SEC, for calling our cardiologist because we are 2 and 3 and 4 times the amount that we were this time last year. So it's just pretty amazing what the SEC's brought to the Norman community. And then a couple of events. Now I know that back on the YFAC, you saw a big jump back on yours, way back on the 1st to the 4th. There you go. You see that big spike there. That was for MAYB. Basketball tournament they brought over at YFAC, and then they had an overflow at Premier. They brought in about 150 teams. The economic impact was $877,000 into Norman direct sales. The other event that we brought in was UFFL, which is United Flag Football League, and that was 35 teams. 32 of those teams were from out of town, and that brought in just under 100,000 in direct sales. So that's what I have. If you have any questions, let me know.
So those tournaments, 2-day tournaments, 3-day tournaments?
So the MAYB was 3, and then the flag football tournament was 2.
So almost $1 million.
And I was, MAYB was back to school weekend, tax-free weekend, which Anthony's favorite terms over there. But anywhere you would go, anywhere in the city area, you would see kids walking around. And I'm talking about Oklahoma City too, with girls walking around with jerseys on. Basketball jerseys, they were everywhere.
Good work on that.
We'll keep bringing it to you and keep gathering it, and the more data we have, I think the more informed decisions council can make going forward.
No, I agree. I really appreciate this part of BACA. I know it's a new addition in the past few months, but it's been really insightful. So really excited to see kind of how the next few months trend as we get into some of those bigger names of SEC. You know, we haven't had Alabama come yet. So
Brace yourselves.
appreciate you guys.
Of course.
Thank you.
The demonstration of the ROI.
Oh,
of
the proof of concept. You got it all day long. Absolutely.
You don't think Lane's gonna travel?
Parents anyway. Council, we'd like to introduce our outside counsel, Mrs. Catherine Walker. She's with the Center for Economic Development Law. And now that they have a little breathing room in some capacity because the entertainment district TIF is in its next phase, she's agreed to join us as we initiate the conversation regarding the creation of a master plan for tax increment financing districts citywide. We've asked Dr. Joyce Green, who drives our GIS program, to join us with a tool we'll be able to look at and draw some polygons around some areas of town and kind of have those discussions about what we think makes sense. Kind of on that note, one of the areas I know council's very interested in regarding the formation of a possible TIF is on Griffin land. And this afternoon, we had a Zoom call with a lady named Carrie Carmen of OMES, responsible for the sale of Griffin land. We had some in-depth conversations, and I just asked her straight up, what would the willingness be of OMES or the Department of Mental Health to be an applicant in the formation of a TIF district? And she said, oh, we're on board. That's not an issue for us. So wonderful news, and we'll keep you posted. And I'll turn it over to Mrs. Catherine Walker.
Excellent.
Thank you. It's nice to be back. My car came here. This is maybe the one place I've gone in the last 3 months that didn't require a map. So it was an easy trip. I know this has been something you guys have talked about for the last couple of years. I think it was initially Councilmember Grant's suggestion at retreat probably 2 years ago. I'm guessing it lived on in this year's retreat. Was it yours? One of
I
yours?
think it was 4 of us.
There were probably a lot of Post-it notes on that one. I think that's how we did it that year.
That's exactly right.
But I think it came from a recognition that we've got some parts of town that are experiencing stagnant or depressed economic growth, and we want to figure out a way to address that. And tax increment financing might be an option. We have opportunities, of course, with undeveloped land, Griffin, where tax increment financing could help it develop in a way that you guys want to see it develop, that meets needs of the cities and of the city in terms of housing or other things that you want in that area. And so that presents a really unique opportunity. And of course, as I said, this has been identified at your retreats recently. So we've got several goals just to get us started here. I thought I'd start sort of with what makes a TIF eligible, or what makes an area eligible for a TIF. And then talk about areas where we might have a lack of city infrastructure. Those are really easily identified project costs in a TIF. And if we've got some infrastructure that's maybe hindering development or redevelopment in areas where we're seeing some of this depressed or stagnant economic growth, that might be a good place to start. And then identify project areas and increment districts designed to address those needs and spur that development that you all are wanting to see. So the Local Development Act was enacted as a statutory method by which cities can undertake development projects contemplated by Article 10, Section 6C of the Constitution. That was a constitutional amendment added in 1990 after approval by the voters, and then the Local Development Act came along a couple years later to implement it. The purpose of both of those is to promote planning, financing, and development or redevelopment of areas determined to be unproductive, undeveloped, underdeveloped, or blighted. The legislature has declared that, and this is backed up by case law, that 3 different designated areas are de facto unproductive, underdeveloped, undeveloped, or blighted areas, and that's historic preservation areas, reinvestment areas, and then enterprise areas. Oklahoma has a lot of enterprise areas, so that's the most common area you'll see in a TIF across the state. You do see some reinvestment areas. I don't know of any historic preservation areas, but that doesn't mean historic preservation isn't happening, because it's probably an enterprise area. And those areas are really easy ways to check that box. You have to also look at the legislative guidelines and other statutory requirements. And I'll talk first about each of these 3 types of areas and how those are defined, and then we can talk about those legislative guidelines. So a reinvestment area is defined as an area requiring public improvements to reverse economic stagnation or decline, to serve as a catalyst for retaining or expanding employment, to attract major investment in the area, or to preserve or enhance the tax base for an area in which 50% or more of the structures in the area are 35 years or older. Yeah, because that's usually when you're starting to need some investment. These areas are detrimental to the public health, safety, morals, or welfare. It could become a blighted area because of dilapidation, obsolescence, deterioration, illegal use of the structures, not meeting code, abandoned structures, and excessive vacancies. Those kind of things, we have a lot of, well, it's a long list, but basically property that's not being taken care of and hasn't been taken care of probably for a long time. And then it includes blighted areas as defined by the urban renewal statutes, which has a lot of overlap with the previous bullet there. Historic preservation areas are geographic areas that are listed in or nominated by the State Historic Preservation Officer to the National Register of Historic Places. It can be an area or it can be a structure that's similarly listed in the National Register. It has to be in a historic district, so subject to historic zoning. And any rehabilitation in those areas must meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation to qualify for any incentives or exemptions.
One moment real quick, Mayor Heikla.
Yes.
I'm thinking about the chapel on Griffin.
Mm-hmm.
It's not zoned that way because we don't own the land. If we chose to, could we zone that purposely and still be eligible to use it as an anchor?
You could, but it's an enterprise zone, so we can easily meet eligibility there,
Either way,
at least in that baseline level.
Thank you.
So enterprise areas are areas within a designated enterprise zone, makes sense, right? But they're designated under the Enterprise Zone Act annually on July 1st. It's based on census data, and they're really looking at areas of economic distress. And you will look at the map and say, not all of those areas are experiencing economic distress. Doesn't mean they're not enterprise zones. There's been some definition changes in the statute over the years, and they've grandfathered in tracts that qualified under previous definitions. So you'll see some areas like UNP where you think that's maybe not economic distress, maybe that's just underdeveloped, back in the early 2000s. But it was an enterprise zone, and it was designated that way long time ago. I tried to get the number from the Department of Commerce for the year, but prior to at least 2002, I think, which was when the statute was last amended. It also includes areas of economic distress. I wanted to talk about that. This is the hardest definition to read, and it almost doesn't make sense. But it's really looking at those census tracts that are experiencing high levels of poverty. So you've got a population of people in the tract that are equal to or greater than 30% of the total population, the household income for which is equal to or less than the poverty level. It's poorly written. A population of persons, the per capita gross income for whom is 15% or more below the state capita income. And we've got quite a few of those, and that's really the bulk of our enterprise zones. It can include areas designated as federal enterprise communities, and 2000 was when the law changed. That's where you see some grandfathered EZs or enterprise zones under the old definition. They also have some that are designated as priority enterprise zones, and that just means they're eligible for additional resources or programs through the Department of Commerce. So you'll see several colors on the map we'll show you in a little bit. These are the legislative guidelines, and you have to show in the project plan that you've complied with this, but the courts give cities a lot of discretion to decide for their community whether these are true. So use in cases where investment, development, and economic growth is difficult but possible with the tools in the Local Development Act. Don't use it where investment, development, and economic growth would have occurred anyway. Sometimes that might be the type of development versus what would have occurred anyway. Use the act to supplement and not supplant or replace public functions or services. Use it in conjunction with existing programs and efforts where possible. So the Enterprise Zone Act, the Main Street Program, things like that. Don't delineate boundaries that dissect a similar area or create unfair competitive advantage. And then emphasize conservation, preservation, and rehabilitation, and minimize demolition, clearance, and relocation where it's possible. Again, when you read cases about this, the court gives you guys a lot of discretion because they do recognize, I think, that it's a community decision, and so the decision makers get that discretion to decide what works. Project costs can really run the gamut. You'll see a lot of TIFs, and in fact, your first 3 TIFs were heavily capital costs or infrastructure, public needs centered. So acquisition of land, the construction of public works and facilities. This really screams Griffin. Acquisition of buildings and structures for demolition, alteration, remodeling, environmental remediation, things like that. It also includes financing costs, real property assembly costs, professional services, direct administrative costs. So that's your outside legal, your financial bond advisor, your cost of Anthony having to do the allocation every year and get his calculator out. Organizational costs, so the cost to put the whole thing together, and then costs incurred in the maintenance, management, marketing, and other services if you have an active Main Street program. I thought that was interesting. We don't have one, but if we did and there was a TIF, it could be a project cost to even hire the management for that activity, which is interesting. Yeah.
So if we're talking about an East Downtown TIF, because we already have a Center City one that encompasses some of Maine, how would that work if Center City's already its own TIF and doesn't really have this Main Street part to it?
I think you can do some overlap certainly. So you couldn't overlap increment districts, but you could overlap the project areas.
Okay.
And so you could draw that project area a little broader to make sure you're encompassing all of Main Street. Or you could stop it at the tracks. That doesn't mean that the Main Street program stops at the tracks, but that program would, you know, the things that were TIF funded would be the things within the project area.
And then, just because it's at the top of my mind, the historic tax credits, like if something's zoned a historic district, they would have access to that versus an enterprise zone, or would an enterprise zone also have access to those?
If you meet the qualifications for the historic tax credits, you can get those regardless of what designation you
Okay,
have here.
so the
That's just really
chapel-
just the qualifier for the TIF.
Okay, so the chapel would still potentially be able to get that historic tax credit?
Yeah, and I'm assuming it's on the Register of Historic Places, but I don't know that for sure.
That's a good question
definitely
to
something-
ask and answer.
Yeah,
That's the
to
first
look
step.
into.
Yeah, to get historic tax credits, you have to be on
Yeah.
the register.
Yeah.
So that's a process you gotta go through the beginning.
So that would be the place to start. And then the last one, of course, is assistance in development financing, which you saw that with your most recent TIF. So practical considerations, we've got to have enough new revenue to cover the project costs. So whatever infrastructure or other great ideas you have for a TIF, we've got to have enough revenue generation within the TIF to make it work, right? And so you really have to think about that. Obviously, undeveloped property is easy pickings. There's nothing being generated there. If something's built, you get the maximum benefit out of that. If you have developed property that might be ready to be redeveloped in a significant way, that is also a good way to get more increment revenue. But the more projects or the more expensive type of projects you have, you're gonna have to have higher levels of development potential. So it's not always going to work. And I've thought through, I know some of the areas where you guys have been thinking about this, and there might be areas where you just don't generate enough increment. And so there's other options to consider in those situations. If you want to do improved or enhanced amenities within a district, the business improvement district's a great option. I know we've had an unsuccessful effort downtown, but I think there's still interest in a lot of downtown business owners to do something like that. And that may be something that could be done in conjunction with the Main Street program. For needed infrastructure, you know, of course, when you guys go through the budgeting process, if there's small chunks you can kind of take out of those needs and prioritize with your limited funds that are already, you know, not enough, I know very well. That's something you could look at. You could develop a general obligation bond package for something to address some of those larger needs. If it's employment you're thinking of, we can always connect employers with the Department of Commerce to get those quality jobs incentives and other things they may be able to qualify for. And so there's other options out there. So as we go to the map and maybe you start thinking about, well, this needs a lot of infrastructure, but there's not a lot of vacant property or not a lot of property that's primed for big redevelopment. There are other options to look at. So with that, I want to turn it over to Joyce, and she's got the map pulled up.
Let's see.
We're gonna cross our fingers.
Yeah, this is the finger cross.
Easy so far.
So,
Sounded right.
I could grab it.
Who runs Main Street programs?
Yeah, it just grabs permission. Just start with. Where
So the ULI contact.
Interesting. It was fine earlier this afternoon.
We rehearsed at 1:30 today,
We did.
and it worked great.
Let's see. I'm not certain how to switch it back to that. Because it's obviously selected the wrong screen. Come on. Let's see. Is Bryce around? Does he have any ideas on this one?
We'll grab him.
Because I know there's a way to change.
Oh, there he
Here
is.
he comes.
Bryce to the rescue.
Because it's not grabbing my thing there. Okay.
That looks more like a computer screen. Ta-da. Oh,
Uh-oh, well,
Just minimized it.
oh, hold on. All right, there we go. Let's not.
thanks, Bryce.
Okay.
So, Dr. J, maybe, East Main, kind of maybe starting at the railroad tracks and zoom in. We know we have Center City TIF. And a conversation has been, do you extend the current TIF or do you start with a new TIF from the railroad tracks going east? And I think there's probably more value in a new TIF with new objectives in terms of what the TIF revenue could actually help support. In terms of the upside for future ad valorem and or sales tax, we know there are properties currently owned by the government that are tax exempt that we anticipate being under private ownership in the next year or so, and vertical construction taking place. And the opportunity, even things like we're told the Vista building, currently tax exempt, will be up for sale when a new sheriff's headquarters is built out by the jail. And to be able to capture that just change in ownership from zero to new assessed value would be a nice kickstart.
And to that point about starting a new one on East Main, you also get to start the 25-year clock over, and so max value.
So,
I will say, as to the question about overlapping with Center City is just an ad valorem TIF. So you could do a sales tax increment into the Center City area.
So we talked about maybe starting at the railroad tracks, heading east. In terms of a northern boundary, we definitely wanted the opportunity to catch both sides of Gray Street. But council may have other ideas about how far north you might want to be able to drag the line.
Well, and that's kind of where I think, you might carve them up into different districts. I think the challenge is getting a district that's too big and you've got too many needs and too many projects that you're trying to fund with it. And if you carve them up a certain way, I think it's a little more manageable. So I don't disagree that taking it to Robinson's a bad idea, but maybe you stop it at Acres and start a new one north of Acres.
Yeah, because you can have how many project areas inside of a district?
You can have a broad project area and then individual increment districts for multiple projects, yeah. And that's how Oklahoma City has done their downtown.
If we're talking east downtown, the thought was east of tracks, then you have like this little strip off Finley in Maine, down to Alameda, up to Robinson.
And east to past Porter?
12th.
That might be part of a Griffin one.
Yeah, so in the other half of that conversation is a Griffin TIF, how far west would the Griffin TIF go and make sense?
I thought 12th on that. And then can it come right up to the other TIF district? So you could have it a Griffin one could stop at Stewart, his Finley would be covered by that other one. And then it could go Robinson, 12th, and Alameda.
Okay, so you're wanting Robinson
Robinson to the north?
and kind of Alameda at the south on both of those?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And Alameda's a little weird.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little weird because you'll be kind of at the tracks, you'll be going Sims and then dropping back down probably.
Yeah.
So, okay.
But there's some neighborhood commercial opportunities on these, because you have McMichael's Music over there. I think there's also maybe a testing facility over there.
Pharmacy still there?
I think so. And then you also have like Donate a Miracle, like closer to Porter.
And Dr. J, that color on the map, that tan represents,
These are the grandfathered ones.
okay.
This is a priority one. And then the newest ones are these kind of like blue colors down here.
So we think it meets the criteria where these conversations would qualify for TIF
Yeah,
formation.
actually,
Perfectly.
perfectly, if you take it along Sims down to Alameda, that's actually the edge of the enterprise.
We don't even have to draw a polygon, the polygon's been drawn for us.
Pretty much,
Isn't that
you're
amazing?
following an enterprise zone there.
Well, that says a lot. You guys are obviously on the right
Yeah.
track.
Well, it is my neighborhood, area, so.
Is there such a thing as too big of an area? I mean, do you want to define it more? I mean, because I'm just comparing it to the Center City one. It looks like to be about twice the size of Center City, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
I think it depends on the time you think it'll take to do the projects.
Right.
Because you have to trigger the increment districts in so much time, and then that starts your 25-year clock.
And that's kind of what I meant about having multiple different smaller districts, because if you prime the pump with one district and you know something's coming in a neighboring district, you can wait to trigger the clock until that big investment comes. Sorry, Mayor Heikkila.
But you have to have something in there to get money from, right? Whether it's ad valorem or sales tax,
Right.
and that's not a very heavy sales tax area. There are some businesses up there, so we'd have to tend towards convincing the county to take some of their ad valorem.
Yeah, unless we had some sort of small business incentive in there and it was used to generate more businesses and more sales tax in the area. I know incentives are a four-letter dirty word, but I think if there's incentives for affordable housing, there are incentives for local businesses. It depends on what the incentive is and who it goes to.
This is where I would go back to like a participatory budgeting kind of conversation to speak with the community about desires and opportunities.
Yeah, no, I think it's great.
And infrastructure wise, I mean, we've obviously got sewer, water. There's probably opportunities maybe to improve some storm drain outcomes
On Alameda.
in that area. And of course, a big amenity that, I mean, you could wait 7 years and start an investment in the Andrews Park Master Plan, or potentially through TIF revenue. If Catherine says yes, you could identify one of the infrastructure desires as the implementation of the Andrews Park Master Plan. It's outside the collection boundaries, but it's like the big park for Core Norman.
Yeah, and we just have to draw the project area broader to make sure it encompasses that.
So these two are what you would consider the increment areas?
The Griffin, how far east do we go on Griffin to?
That goes to 12.
Yeah. Basically took in the entire northern part of the
Yep.
property. Actually took in the entire property. Just looked at Alameda.
So Griffin's obviously gonna be your big revenue generator. So you probably want one project area that encompasses both of these, because there's not a lot of revenue generation in the one on the left. And so if you wanna have enough revenue to do some improvements in a broader project area, it's better that the Griffin area is included as the increment district for that.
Yeah.
Dr. Joyce, can you highlight where the
Large
Porter
area?
campus is?
Good.
The hospital?
The hospital's right here.
Oh, I can't see your cursor. What? Oh, okay, there.
All right, so
Got it. And once again, it, largely tax exempt.
Right.
And would definitely need different infrastructure for that to become something other than what it is today.
I wanted to propose another area whenever you guys are
Okay.
cleaned up with this one.
so are we still wanting this to be two different areas, or are we wanting this to be one area?
I think what Ms. Walker says makes a lot of sense, if it's the area that's got the most potential for property taxes, because there's zero right now, so anything you put on the rolls will be an increment. And then sales tax, you could build commercial in that area that goes to fund. This is where I don't know enough to say.
That would be
But that's why we're having this darn conversation.
I mean, that could be the increment district on the right, and then the project area could be broader to
Could be the whole thing,
fund,
including
yeah,
perhaps.
more improvements. It just depends on how much you have in improvements.
Right.
and we can start running projections, once we have an idea of
And-
what would be developed there.
Yeah, and once, I mean, and just having this recognition that we think we're on the right track, our ability to identify, you know, how many vacant parcels are there in the bigger area, it'll give us some idea about, you know, even infill, single-family residential development will add increment over time. The vacant lots are generating nothing.
Other part of that is we have a master plan coming that will kind of say like, oh, you can go 4 stories up here, but over here you may be a pocket neighborhood, and everything in between.
Is that the Griffin
Yes.
update? Okay. When is that coming, do we know?
Not sure yet. Still neck deep. Hi, Catherine. Still neck deep in AIM. Marty has not really started on it at this point, but we're still gonna look forward to that.
So we'll save that.
Yeah.
Makes sense,
Um,
saved.
and then staff and our attorneys from the Center for Economic Development Law will be able to work on this, bring you back some opportunities and like lists of infrastructure that our utilities guys, they know where we have capacity, where we don't. Also, what we do recognize, like on that Porter campus, the electrical infrastructure up there, it was all driven by a big giant central plant that is not really a cost-effective solution for providing power to what ultimately gets built there. So they're gonna have some interesting infrastructure needs to redevelop that old Porter campus. So I think if there's other territories we wanna go up there in Polygon, we'll move to those and capture that too, give staff.
Real quick, before you move on for this one, I just wanna, one thing I don't wanna lose in the discussion of this is everything on the east side of 12th. And I mean, by looking at this map, it doesn't look like there's a color there, and so does that mean that we are not eligible for a TIF in that area?
Unless it was a reinvestment area, so that's an area with blight,
Okay,
dilapidated buildings, things like that.
is that defined?
Yeah.
I know you went through those definitions, but
That was
Think of
the,
12 millimeters.
maybe the
Yeah,
longest.
do we get to make the call? Is that,
that's what I'm
Catherine,
wondering.
who?
Or if it's just
Yeah,
related
it's
to
not
census data.
designated, it's just something we would have to, determine, and we would include it in the TIF ordinance of finding
Okay,
that this is a.
So we'll investigate that and see where we think, maybe our chief building official could clearly draw a line and say, yeah, this probably qualifies.
absolutely. I mean, cause yeah, Alameda and 12th especially, but even more so Lindsay and 12th. There's some really underutilized spaces down there.
Yeah, and that might be an area that's a little bit more challenging, just because,
Actually, what I wanted to propose was an area from Classen to Southeast 24th and then Lindsay to Cedar Lane.
Oh,
Alright, say that again.
Classen, east to Southeast 24th, and then the northern boundary being Lindsay and the southern boundary being Cedar Lane.
you might wanna go to the next street north of Lindsay to, so you can get that property that's
Yeah, like
along
Biloxi or.
Brooks.
Picture is
Brooks,
worth
yeah.
1,000.
It doesn't go all the way.
No way to do this
but I
without
think-
Yeah, I mean,
We go
this one
towards
for your
the
enterprise
right.
zone, you kinda go there, but we could do this and do Boyd. Over.
Yeah, I mean, that's gonna be really hard to do the legal description for, because the street just ends. So we'd be
Yeah.
cutting properties in the middle. But we can play around with that and see,
So, we're gonna go,
yeah, and it doesn't
So where
capture
do we-
everything south of Lindsay. That's not
Yeah.
there for us.
yeah, there's, actually, I guess it does go out to 24th on the new stuff. So that's a new one.
Maybe north of Lindsay needs more than south. I don't know.
Okay, so what's gonna be the northern boundary of this?
I was hoping
Somewhere in there.
to capture the the Colonial Estates District just right there at Lindsay,
Okay.
short of going all the way up to Alameda. But I don't think there's anything that goes all the way through.
Well, and the other ones end at 12th, so maybe that is a place you can go up to Alameda and,
The western boundary being Classen and then follow along Classen down to Cedar Lane. And then over to 24th.
Okay, there's Cedar Lane.
There's just a lot of new housing and lots of development, the perfect swing area, that whole strip there could be
That's a great
something.
opportunity for redevelopment.
Okay, so remind me what you want your northern boundary to be. So
Lindsay-ish,
Lindsay, okay.
southern boundary Cedar Lane,
So you want,
western
when you're
boundary.
suggesting that we kind of come a little bit north here
Yeah.
to catch both sides of, I'm gonna draw something general and we'll
Yeah.
figure out what a good north of Lindsay boundary is.
And if it makes sense to bring the boundary up from Cedar Lane, that's fine, it just seemed like a good,
Oh, that area is purple, okay.
So this area is actually a priority zone, so that's fine.
But the area north of Imhoff, that's just an enterprise zone,
Yeah.
okay. At first it looked like it wasn't.
What's a
Yeah, that's
priority?
one of the new ones that came in that we didn't have before,
Yeah.
so that's one of the ones that,
affordable housing is also in there.
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Picture of affordable housing project.
Alright, so let's just. Create.
And I hate to tiff and run, but I have to go to my kid's school a bit, so thank you for letting me get there.
That's what we needed though, thank you, we appreciate it.
He's here, we can delete all that.
Tiff and run.
Nothing's left on me.
Tiff and run.
It'll have Classen and Lindsay in it.
Yeah.
Cause there is somebody interested in affordable housing. With an apartment.
What do you call it, RV park?
Yep.
In that corner?
I think that pretty much grabs it. And the blue or purple, whatever color that is, that is eligible. So far, everything you're drawing seems to fit the criteria.
Okay.
Makes sense, that the census tracts with the poverty would be the ones that need the love, yeah.
What is priority, you said it was a priority zone?
Yeah, so the legislature designated some properties as priority zones beginning in 2018, and it gets the more services and access to more things from the Department of Commerce. The statute's not real clear on what that is.
Oh.
But just, it enables you for more assistance, basically, so that's a Department of Commerce question. I'll follow up with them and find out.
Would that, and I'm interrupting, but it just is the, would that be the ability to be able to structurally fix houses and stuff that's in there, if we can generate something? Because that's not a very high tax generating area.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, it might be a grant or something like that, or assistance, it would be assistance in development financing under the act, I think, but, we can look at programs like that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Grant.
We had talked about it for Griffin, but it could apply here if you're looking for housing. There is economic development incentive through HUD. That could also put housing in this area, in addition to whatever TIF funds.
The area that I really wanted to look at, and I'm not liking the color I see, but it would be the Lindsay Street corridor, basically from I-35 to Berry.
Oh, west.
And I mean, it could extend beyond Berry, obviously, but I mean, I think you get into the university at that point, and it's just, I'm really trying to impact the commercial areas there that have kind of been depressed ever since we, the road closures and the road projects that went on there, and, it's, gosh, yeah, there's nothing there, is there?
On the other side of Berry, people have bought and done stuff,
Right,
so.
right, exactly.
So the blue is possible, but the,
Gray is nothing.
doesn't meet criteria.
And does that mean it's off the table completely, or is there another path, potentially?
I think that area would be hard to say it's a reinvestment area. There are certainly some properties
Right.
that are reinvestment properties, but I don't know that the area would qualify.
So you would think maybe a bid would be more appropriate?
Yeah, I think it depends on what kind of improvements we're wanting to do. But
Facade improvements, I mean,
Yeah.
just physical, visual improvements
Yeah.
more than anything.
yeah, probably not a TIF on that one, but maybe a business improvement district or something else.
And then
Grant program or something.
the other one that I really wanted to look at was flood and acres. Yeah. Basically on both sides of flood, all the way until you get to the tracks and then the neighborhood. Tracks on the east, neighborhood on the west.
Between Robinson and Acres.
Yeah,
Is
I
there
think
like a tire shop right there in that
Yeah.
corner?
Yes.
it's like the old warehouse kind of district. It's, not, I mean, there are good buildings back in there, but I don't think there's anything that's,
Yeah, the shopping center on the west side of Flood.
yeah, that can,
Yes.
Yes,
that can go.
with the old computer store and,
Yeah.
Good job.
yeah, good job.
And I just, I hate to say it this way, but I feel like some of those property owners might need an incentive to push them to do something.
Or property
Or
owner.
that's exactly.
Dr. Dykes.
I would also be curious, what residents in that area want to see as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, to me, that, this area is, I keep harping on the idea of James Garner being Norman's kind of cultural arts corridor or just, connection from north to south. And if you can link up this neighborhood to the library, to Andrews Park, down to Gray Street, I mean, you really start to build a thoroughfare. This is the northernmost anchor, and the campus would be the southernmost anchor of
Where
it.
does Center City stop? Is it Gray Street?
It's just north of Gray.
Here, I put the center city is here.
I was just thinking, like, what if you extended it down a little bit to like Nebraska? Or I guess the project area could encompass like the neighborhoods around this.
You're probably gonna wanna put Andrews Park in something.
I would put that, I think maybe the answer is really a larger project area with multiple increment districts, just because there aren't a lot of opportunities to generate a lot of increment in some of these areas.
And we're talking mostly property tax, like ad valorem.
There may be areas where sales tax is appropriate, but most of this looks like property tax. It reminds me a lot of Center City,
There is one area that I wanted to look at that might be sales tax, and I don't really know if it fits. That would be Main and 24th, right off I-35. Those four corners.
Oh, hey, there's
West.
some on the west side.
It's east of I-35, but west 24th is what I'm trying to say.
It's not an enterprise.
It's not there. Just that's like the most highly trafficked four corners in all of Norman, and it could really use a facelift. Okay.
Yeah, Main and 24th is the busiest intersection in town.
Is that under Highway 9? What is that, further south? There's a 10. What is all that?
It's all trails.
Yeah, that's a grandfathered enterprise zone, I think, right?
Yeah, it is a grandfathered enterprise zone, so I don't know.
Interesting.
It may have just been a really big tract back when they drew it, cause I think they did them by tracts.
How long are they grandfathered for? Forever?
Yeah, forever unless the statute were to change.
Interesting.
Well, once you initiate the TIF, if the TIF is formalized, it doesn't matter if it goes after that, you got the TIF.
Because I know there's some drainage problems down there, some infrastructure challenges, and I don't know if the TIF's the right way to solve some of them, but this is a solution that I never even considered.
Well, some of your infrastructure could be that Norman Forward Trails
That's exactly what I'm
thing,
thinking.
and we're looking at projects that if you can solve the financing through another vehicle, it's less of a demand on Norman Forward, you can actually just be able to get more things done. So,
I was gonna say, there's that state question that's hanging out there that we'll be voting on.
PID,
Public improvement, or, no, yeah, public,
Bids.
8:33,
Yeah.
I think is the
yes.
state question. It's on your ballots. If you're voting absentee, it's already in your mailbox.
No implementation language yet, I think.
Right.
Statutes, but if it passes, it'll come.
I was gonna ask, is this map, where would you find it if you wanted to look at where all the zones are?
It's on the Department of Commerce website. They have a great map. You can click on each census tract and see the poverty levels and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this is where I stole it from. I just imported. In fact, some of these, I think we're just looking directly at their map, because I didn't even download the data.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, I don't know if you can pull out and kind of see what, like a bird's eye view of where all the zones are, but I'm surprised about what parts are shaded on
Yeah,
here.
me too.
Yeah, it's,
I guess we're either fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you interpret that.
yeah, and I'm not sure what this little purple piece
That's
is
the
on the right.
opportunity zone.
Oh, okay, there you go. That's why it's a priority zone then.
Why is that an opportunity zone?
Yeah.
What's out there?
I didn't know what road, is that 48th?
60th.
Yeah. we don't have a lot of
36th
infrastructure
on the
that way.
west to 60th and then up to
River
Rock
Ross,
Creek.
all the way south on Power 9 too.
Good shot.
Anyway,
just
it
wanted
was
to
on
know
their map, so
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
came in.
And
I
opportunity
imported their
zones,
stuff.
opportunity zones, that was a President Trump thing, right?
No, they've been around longer than that,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, with those polygons, the beauty of that GIS tool is we can pull data up into that same polygon and look at current assessed value. We can look at aerials and identify vacant land. We can do an awful lot of data analytics just by knowing your polygon preferences. And good news is, with our partners at the Center for Economic Development Law, the ability to kind of develop project plans for each of those polygons, depending on what level of detail we need to get into. I think where we need a property owner's participation, like on Griffin, we've been told that's totally achievable. And the balance of those polygons, it's not a matter of needing like property owner participation in the process.
It's really property owner participation in Griffin because it's not zoned and it's not designated as anything in our land use plan other than institutional, I think, so. That's why you want their cooperation on that.
Yeah, I would say the project area, I guess, that discussion, I guess, is where I would like to see those stakeholders, whether nonprofit, residential, business, kind of come forward and, and also kind of reset the narrative on TIF because, people are upset that they haven't had a lot of input on what gets redeveloped where, and I think this would be, addressing that.
Yeah, I mean, you've had some TIFs where it's an idea brought to you by someone, so Campus Corner was brought to you by the Campus Corner
Merchants.
Merchants Association, I lost the name of it. Center City was our own doing because we were going through the form-based code. And then with UNP, that's been, the original UNP was the request of the OU Foundation, but then council put together a citizen committee and they grew that. And so we've just kind of done it all different ways, I think. So this is really one where you're in the driver's seat. And so whatever public input you need or want is up to you guys.
Councilmember Dixon.
Can we look at a spot, west of 35, just north of Robinson? That kind of tan spot,
West side, there you go. Yeah.
So
just north, I'm sorry, I guess it's north of Rock Creek. I was wanting to kind of look at that, because there's some empty spots next to that. They had that's the hospital and all that area. I was actually just thinking south of there, closer to Robinson, what was that, Next Era?
Next step.
Next step, there's an office building there, some apartments, but there's some fields there that just,
Yeah,
You draw a lot of opposition from that neighborhood.
yeah, there have been developments proposed.
gotcha.
something will
public
eventually
engagement.
happen.
Yeah. I think the last proposal was maybe car dealerships, that might have been part of the problem.
I don't blame them.
If you ask them what they want, you might get something.
True. Well, are there any other ideas for potential districts to look at today, or do we wanna kind of pause here and everybody go look, this is on the Department of Commerce website, you said?
Yeah,
I think I'm gonna drill down
Yeah,
on
go
this
play
and
around
kind of
with it.
see what the opportunities are,
it's interesting.
pun not intended, but,
We'll start building data layers under the polygons we've identified, and we can just add more to it. And then maybe, well, since Baca meets once a month, maybe 4 weeks from now, we'll be able to have another discussion and keep adding meat to it until we're ready to start really fleshing out a project plan.
I know that the east of the tracks main TIF was high priority because of several potential projects that might be coming online, and our ability to capture that before they hit the tax rolls.
And Griffin too, because
And
it
Griffin as
it
well.
could be changing
So I mean, I think
in the
those
very near
two,
future.
I think those two are fairly locked in. I mean, I think the boundary might change a little bit, but I think in terms of priority of council and kind of the general boundary we've shown. So I'd love to see what we can do next steps to get that ball rolling
On
on.
those two.
Yeah.
I would say for East Downtown and possibly Griffin, you've got property owners who've already expressed their desires, improved alleys, streetscape, all that.
Yep.
And residents who are in the process of organizing their neighborhood, Original Town Site just did that, and they'll be pursuing CDBG funding for LED lights, but it won't be the whole neighborhood. So in a project plan, they might be asking, hey, you're doing these new lights in some spots, we want our neighborhood to be cohesive,
Low hanging fruit.
Great idea.
and sidewalks.
Alleys and sidewalks, I mean.
Well,
you're-
and we did learn, and this is where, most of us think, well, just put down the sidewalks. And then the public works guys go, oh, what do we do with the stormwater if we do that? I mean, so all absolutely worthwhile pursuits. And we have no idea what any of it, we know what a sidewalk costs, but all of a sudden, if we've got to change a whole stormwater system, because this is how we'll find those things out.
Well, there might be some overlap with the projects identified in the stormwater master plan too,
That's a good idea.
especially on Griffin.
Good thing all those steering committees and master plan elements are all underway. It's gonna be really good timing, I think.
Are there any other comments? All right, seeing none, I appreciate you guys for the work and welcome back temporarily.
Thank you so much.
It's great to see you.
We may keep you busy for a long time going this way.
All right, this meeting is adjourned.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, I mean, this is the best turnout I've had for a Baca, I think, in the 4 years I've been doing it, so.
I've been so, I was here